Hi there, and welcome back. You're listening to the Everglade Chronicles, a reading. I'm Garrett Shave, the author. Today I'll be reading Chapter 9, Part 2, What Happens Next. It's the epic conclusion, people. Jessica has taken the bold step and revealed herself to her friends. Jessica Walker is Isis. Can the fight still go on? Let's get started. Isis is really Jessica Walker? Tyler was flabbergasted. How could I have not known? Cassidy was questioning herself, and I know everything. Amazing. Cora was speechless with a smirk. I knew all along. Ben chuckled. Mark was so surprised, he said nothing at all. Now that you all know who the real hero is, it is time we went to work, I said. This is interesting. Cassidy brought her hand to her chin in a thoughtful pose. The most timid, quiet, and loyal girl in the meadow is really the most reckless and heroic. That is what legends are made of, right here. That's enough, I laughed. My identity remains here, however. The meadow cannot know who their masked hero is, all right? Of course, everyone agreed. What are you thinking, Isis? Tyler asked after I had placed my mask back on. Hudson has lost faith in the Queen, I said. He is furious that nothing was given to him for his efforts, and he is willing to look the other way. If the Queen comes under fire, he will ignore it. That's good news, Cassidy said. A duke like Hudson is a pillar of the Queen's support. Without him, she is set to lose so much. The Commons already hate the Queen, Ben said. Overall, morale is down, as are her ratings across the kingdom. They are especially low here, in the Lost Forest. Our agency is already very powerful, Cora told us. If our numbers are correct, all we have to do is give the word and the people will rise. The Queen could be overthrown before the end of the summer. What a thought, Mark said. Wouldn't that be rather righteous? If we focus on our plans, that could very well be an ideal goal, I remarked. I've also detected a hint of anger from Lord Schuyler, Cora said. Having been listening to Lady Chloe gossip all week, he isn't too impressed with Lord Ashton's promotion. He could also be reluctant to give support to the Queen. This is all very good intel, Cassidy said happily. A combination of several things in this revolution could be a sure thing. The Queen is going down. The early days of June came and went. We were all on the edge, excited because summer vacation was within our grasp. We could very well establish a new kingdom in the days that we were free from school. Most of the time I was too busy with final exams to go to the meadow often, but I was there every weekend. I was not the only one excited for new prospects. It seemed the entire meadow was alive with the idea of a long and prosperous summer. Imagine the idea, Sassy Cassie said to me one afternoon. Caitlin could be ousted by early July, and a new kingdom would be born. The entire summer could be spent mending the broken. I nodded with enthusiasm. However, one would need to oust her before much action could occur. We can focus on that later, Cora said staunchly. We must focus instead our energies on ousting her before the new kingdom. Quite right, Tyler said thoughtfully. We were all crowded in the bushes by the river, in the same area where a kid had pointed an arrow at me through the bushes just a month before. Cassidy's keen hideout was still within the meadow, but it was away from the Queen's ears. She would never dream to find us here, ever. The others were here too. Mark, Ben, Cale, Catherine, Chris, Cora, me, Cassidy, and a few choice others. The Irish twins had been informed of my identity of Isis. Kat claimed she already knew. Cale, on the other hand, was smug and quiet on the matter. Matthew had not yet arrived, but he promised snacks. The men were hard at work, prepping for an attack. Mark and Tyler's years as soldiers had taught them game plans, and Ben's expertise at a certain video game would also come in handy, or so he claimed. It's all about stealth, he kept saying. We cannot very well overthrow a fascist kingdom with stealth, Benjamin, Cora nearly yelled. Something like this will need to be out in the open, Mark observed. I hardly think she will go down without a fight. The rest of them, too, will fight. They stand to lose it all. No prisoners, Cassidy nodded, folding her arms. No one must live. They must all die. Just as the game plan was being amended, Matthew slipped through the trees, carrying bags of chips in both hands. Did I miss anything? He asked. Just bickering, I answered. We are forming a plan. Strategy is a fun topic, he said gingerly, passing the chips around. I suggested we begin with recruitment, Catherine said. I agree, Cale added. Without an army, we stand no chance. First rule of warfare, Mark smirked. We all know that. Thank you, Cale. I thought we talked about this already, Cora asked. The children will follow us, won't they? Some are easier than others, I reckon. Most of them will, Mark said. If I asked the forest kids to join, they would in a heartbeat. Same with the villagers of Sunset, I added. It is those in the royal city who will likely not join us. The Queen has a powerful army. Most of her army was made up of unwilling soldiers from all parts of the meadow, Matthew remarked, crunching chips in his mouth. Imagine if we just called for them. Her own army would disappear in seconds. Agreed, Cassidy nodded, but we cannot take that chance. We have to be prepared. The next little while was spent bickering and chatting, but our combined knowledge of the meadow did help out in the long run. Cora's endless time at Queen's Summit proved supportive, given she knew all the corridors and secret entrances. Having been in the Queen's army, Tyler knew numbers and where the key locations of the military stood. Cassidy's own intel on nearly everyone in the meadow proved to be more helpful than we ever expected. We must go about our business until the arms call comes, Mark announced after we had all agreed. Then we can easily swoop in and pick up an army, Catherine smiled. Exactly, Tyler said. Drop a few hints here or there, see what the children are thinking. This will be glorious, Cassidy grinned. You better believe it, I said. On the weekend I decided to test the waters. My lord was away camping with his family, so I figured now was a good time to approach Madison without repercussion. Madison was busy overlooking the fields when I arrived, and she performed a short bow before me. I had always told her not to, but she felt it was her royal duty. What might I do for you, Mistress Jessica? She asked formally. I only wish to ask a question or two, I replied. Go ahead. What is your view on the Queen? Of the Duke? Madison's face went astray. You must lower your voice, my lady. You speak of treason. Hardly, I replied, adjusting my glasses. I am only asking opinions. You aren't doing some reporting for the Queen, are you? That would be most hateful of you. I have enough on my plate as it is. I do not need a restart. I am speaking on my own free will, Madison. You should know me better than to go reporting back to Her Majesty. I am the Duke's loyal royal attendant. This is a personal matter. If you were really speaking on your free will, then you will know that we hate the Duke, she began. While he has been most lenient on the farming, he's been tough elsewhere. I am finding my wages being cut despite my position as a foreman. I am almost gentry, you know. He has also introduced a few new laws and edicts that are unpopular with us. He stole all the boys and girls away for the army. I know of them, and I spoke against them, I said. Last weekend, Hudson had suggested raising tax on the farming class because there were holes in our budget. The holes were caused by the Duke himself, of course, ill forecasting the cost of war. That is what we have heard, Madison carried on. Without Ben as our mayor, we have no one to turn to. You know you can always speak to me, I told her. I have the Duke's ear, and I look out for the people of this village. I always have. I know, but it always seems like you've got a lot going on yourself. We all do. We are all eating a 5-course dinner right now, even with this war being done, I said. Anyway, you say you hate the Duke? I took a deep breath and exhaled quickly. What I am about to ask you might jeopardize us both, but I must ask. Madison could see the distress on my brow. Ask away. Would you ever consider rising up against the Duke, the Queen? She thought for a moment and looked over at me. Her stare looked as if I had asked her to murder someone. Hardly, miss, she replied at last. Such an act is treason in the highest regard. The worst crime in the world is regicide. Would you consider it a crime if a queen was unjust, evil, merciless? I am not sure, she said. I haven't given the idea much thought. Now I must ask you, what has got you asking these treasonous questions? I have heard on the wind that there is rebellion brewing. I only wanted to gauge the spectrum of the people of the village. I see, she said thoughtfully, touching her chin with one hand. You're gentry yourself, Mistress Jessica. If the Queen were removed, wouldn't you lose your position and be reduced to a commoner like me? Potentially, I replied aimlessly, but I am more concerned with the tone of the meadow, and I feel as if many feel hatred towards the current ruler. Aye, Madison growled. We all do. Would you fight if you were called? Her eyes lit up. Would I rebel against Her Majesty if someone asked? I am not sure, my lady. I cannot say. I cannot say for my tenants either. They aren't your tenants. They belong to the Duke, who in turn belongs to the Queen. The Queen owns all this. We own nothing. Madison thought for a moment and then nodded. I suppose I would fight. Hudson is an awful duke. I hate him. I sure do miss William. He was a good duke. That he was, I said, remembering faintly, William sitting upon the wicker throne in the grove of trees. Why do you ask? I was shaken from my daydream. Oh, nothing, like I said before, just checking with everyone. I feel like rebellion is coming sooner than you might think, Madison. We must all be prepared to stand up and rise. I am glad you will fight, and I am certain your farmers will fight with you. The following week it rained. The downpour started light, then fell into a steady drizzle. While the meadow was not unvisitable in this weather, it did make for a difficult time. I did not go, and neither did my sister. The rain did not yield until Wednesday, and by that time there were large puddles that littered the meadow. Donning my bright yellow rain boots, I made for the island with my pink umbrella in hand. I was caught off guard and surprised by what I saw on the bridge. Queen Venus was standing regally. Her butler stood nearby, hoisting her bright red parasol over her. I had never really viewed the Queen outside her native habitat, except in passing at school. It was odd for the Queen to be idle on the bridge, for she mostly just made for her summit. She was wearing a large coat, puffy with faux fur. Lord Ashton, the new Duke of the Lost Forest, was speaking with her, holding his green umbrella in one hand and his makeshift cane in the other. Lord Kevin was there as well, but he lacked an umbrella. As I strolled across the bridge, the royals paid me no mind. I made sure to ceremoniously bow to the Queen, but she seemed too enthralled in Ashton's conversation to pay me much attention. Her butler nodded towards me, but that was about it. "Did you see the Queen on the bridge?" a familiar voice asked. I turned around sharply, seeing the twins Cale and Catherine standing astutely behind me. They were wearing matching yellow raincoats with matching yellow bonnets. While it wasn't raining much, it was still misting. "I did," I replied, catching my breath. "It was quite odd, don't you think?" "We walked right past," Catherine said. "She didn't even bat an eye," Cale answered. I blinked. I found that odd, given the twins' bright yellow coats. "Did you bow?" "Hardly," Cale answered immediately. We gave her a curious nod. "Hardly a bow," Catherine said. She did not seem to care. For all we know, we are nothing but ants to her. Silly Queen! I nodded. I gave her a typical bow, but she did not notice either. Her butler did, though. "Pay her no mind, we think," Cale said cryptically. "She'll soon be out." "She is just playing a game," his sister added. "Her royal smelliness doesn't respect us, doesn't care for the people of the meadow. All she cares about is her throne." I decided to turn the conversation away, in case someone of importance was viewing us chat, or even hearing us speak of such treasons. "Have we spoken to anyone else in the meadow regarding our little situation?" Cale nodded. "Some in the forest, but that's it. It is hard to speak to those who live in the royal city. Schuyler and his crew have the city tied up. Their support is for the crown." "Just what I thought," I said, thinking. "But the villagers and the forest dwellers are enough, I should think. Their numbers outweigh those in the city." "Hopefully that is the case," Catherine said. A surprised look covered her usual calm face, as if she were remembering something. Quickly she reached into her raincoat and gave me a folded piece of paper. "This is from Sassy Cassie. Read it when you are alone." I nodded and looked over the small folded paper. When I looked up to thank the twins, they were gone. Hello there, it's just the author. I'm just going to interrupt the broadcast to talk about the Ask an Author mini-episode that I'm planning. Do you have some burning questions about the book or the author that you want answered? Find the post promoting this episode and ask your questions. Find us on Instagram or Facebook. I will be hosting an Ask the Author mini-episode where I will do my best to answer your submitted questions. Stay tuned for more details about when the mini-episode will take place. For now, find our post promoting this episode, whether it's on Facebook or Instagram, and ask your question there. Take care for now. The following day, when the rain had finally stopped and the puddles were beginning to disappear, more and more children went to the meadow. When I went after school, the bridge was crowded. Since the war had practically ended, the security passes and ID cards had been tossed away. Only a few tall guards stood near the bridge and they let everyone in. While word in the meadow was that Schuyler had dismantled his secret military operations, several were skeptical. It only made sense to keep them open and to keep them going. I was not convinced the Queen was playing for peace. "How was your camping trip, my lord?" I asked the Duke when I arrived in his tree grotto. "Wet," he said rudely. "It rained most of the time, but we did some fishing. It was all right." "It drizzled here as well, but it was mostly clear on the weekend," I replied. His wicker throne was still wet from the rain, so he stood. He paced around the grove as if he were thinking. "I have an audience with the Queen this evening. Before I must go home and do some homework. I shall request you there, of course." I bowed deeply. "I am honored, Your Grace." "Don't be," he growled. "It is your job to attend me. Might I ask the subject of such an abrupt meeting?" He sighed. "I suppose, if you must. The Queen wishes to ensure Lord Ashton settles in nicely, and without repercussion from the forest people. They can be a bothersome bunch, I've noticed. We will be simply discussing some added security for His Grace." Hudson's tone seemed angry, and then I recalled how mad he had been when the Queen had not bestowed him with any honors or awards. "I've already decided that Sunset cannot possibly part with anyone for the Duke. We are much too busy here tending to the fields," he continued. "If the Queen wants to give that fool some added men, then she can give him her own." "Yes, my lord," I said quietly. "Good idea." "I am going to speak with some people. Make yourself scarce until the meeting," he said. Queen's Summit was alive with activity when we arrived. The Duke had thrown on his velvet red cape and tied his plastic saber to his belt to make himself look more important. The Queen's robust butler greeted us and presented most of the guests with lemonade and small paper cups. The best of the Queen's repertoire was here, from Lord Kevin with his new rimmed glasses to the dull Lady Alice. The major domo and the new Duke were rubbing elbows near the throne, and some lesser gentry were out and about. I found Cora Hastings near the entrance, simply looking around. "I am glad you are here," she said softly. "Such a random meeting is very out of character for the Queen. I have heard countless renditions of the bridge story, too. It all seemed so odd to me." "I agree," I nodded. "Lord Hudson says it has something to do with the military and some added men for Ashton when he goes to the Lost Forest." Cora looked perplexed. "I thought he was already welcomed there." "Perhaps he just needs more security." The Queen's herald, a small seventh grader, blew on his plastic trumpet and called the crowd to silence. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice cracking, "Her Royal Majesty, Queen Venus." Caitlin Hardy swept into the quote-unquote room, wearing an ankle-length summer dress with a hideous pattern of half-cut lemons. The hem was frilled, and so were the shoulders. Atop her head she wore her plastic crown, and as she strolled to her throne, paying no attention to anyone bowing. Lord Schuyler took his position next to the tall throne, and the Queen wore an unimpressed look. "All of you may rise." Her voice was as sharp as ice. "Might we begin?" Tyler did not seem vexed by her angry tone of voice. "I suppose, if we must," she said, rising once more. "All of you lords and ladies have been called here because our new little Duke does not feel he is strong enough in the Lost Forest." As the Queen trailed off, I realized it now. She had initially promoted Ashton because she liked him, but upon him taking his position, she finally noticed his incompetence. He was as useful as Tyler Crest, and the Queen hated useless people. She was not impressed with his cowardice. In closing, I propose a few children from each outlining duchy as well as a few from within the city to assist our new troubled lord. "Might I say a word, Your Majesty?" Hudson asked calmly. "Approach." The Queen waved her hand. "Sunset cannot possibly assist in this matter," he said frankly. "Lord Ashton has an immense fortune, having been within your inner circle of aristocracy for quite a few seasons now. Why must we pardon our men and our women so that he can have a standing army? He should be able to hire his own, given his wealth." The Duke was treading into icy waters, for his talk was both rash and dangerous. Venus, however, seemed intrigued by what he had to say. She cared not for the people, and it seemed she cared less now about Ashton. "I agree," Lord Kevin added. "The army is for all of us, not just for him. He should be able to make his own, or at least mold some peace from the forest dwellers." "This is all preposterous," Lord Ashton was now sweating. "I have been a loyal servant of this realm for many seasons, and it is my royal duty to lead the Lost Forest. As a lord of the realm, am I not entitled to some assistance from the others?" "Quiet, everyone," Schuyler hollered. "I suppose it is the army's duty to at least help the new Duke, not the rest of you. His coronet in the forest sits on a pile of twigs. It is weak, and we must help to create a foundation in which our good friend can rule." The Queen looked flustered, as if she had made some fatal mistake. I was not the only one to notice. "Yes, I suppose that is what I should have done before," she stammered. The army will assist our new lord. The rest of you shall be pardoned with such a task." "A meeting was called for this," Hudson growled. "We were all demanded to be here so your majesty could make such a simple decision?" I gasped, shocked at how the Duke was speaking. "Watch your tongue, my lord," Schuyler fumed. "You are speaking to the sovereign." "You watch yourself, Lord Schuyler," Hudson hissed in reply. "I am not your equal. I am above you." "Silence, all of you," the Queen shouted, raising both her hands. "I will not have this bickering in my court." "What is the real reason you have invited us all here?" Lord Ashton asked. The Queen rose from her throne and stared at the ground. "I want all of you out, now," she growled. "The meeting is—" Before Lord Schuyler could finish his sentence, the Queen shoved him aside. Stumbling back into the guards, the Queen hollered once more, "Get out!" Hastily, the butler led everyone out of the throne room. As we dispersed, the Queen returned to her throne and muddled in her lap for a while. No one had ever seen the Queen rage like that. It was not part of her character, nor of any royal dignity. At the bottom of Queen's Summit, the entire crowd of dignitaries and nobles erupted into chatter. "She is becoming a fool," Hudson said as we strolled back to the village. "Venus is no longer a competent queen. She would never turn on Schuyler like that. I really do wonder what is going on." "I wonder too, my lord. I wonder a lot." Hudson stopped and turned to smile at me. "That's it, isn't it? The queenly power of hers has finally gone to her head. She is slowly going mad. Mad, I tell you. Insanity is a good enough reason to have her removed from power. I must make it my mission to become the regent." "I do not think that is the case, my lord," I replied. "I think she is just having a bad day." "Hardly," Hudson hissed. "She has gone mad. I guess time will tell, won't it?" "I am sure it will, my lord," I said, thinking of Sassy Cassie and our revolution. The meadow would certainly never be the same again. "I will be regent," the Duke mumbled as he strolled on. I stood for a while, admiring the setting sun. The reign of Queen Venus was like a sunset. It was slowly coming to a close. On the horizon, our sun was rising. Our sun of revolution, liberation, and might. A perfect storm was brewing. That concludes Chapter 9, Part 2, our readings for this week. Join me next week when we start Chapter 10, The Colors Fly. War is really coming, and so is rebellion. I hope you all had a happy Halloween, by the way. See you next week! Shimmer by Captures provides the music. Find us online on Facebook by searching The Everglade Chronicles or at Everglade Chronicles on Instagram. I appreciate your support. If you're interested in purchasing any of the Everglade Chronicles novels, you can find them exclusively on Amazon. Thank you and see you next week.